Let's examine Hamlet's path from insanity to sanity. First, let's introduce the members of our group. First up,
Bryce Clark,
in addition to
Nick Weaver,
and Adam Mullen. So it's key before we even dive deeper into it, no Ophelia pun intended, that we first look at his early path in the story of what actions affect his life. So initially we see the death of his father, and that shakes his confidence and his mental stability. So at that point, we would assert that he is indeed insane. His mother marries Claudius and pushes him farther towards the edge. At that point, Hamlet is insane right there and has no sense to his thoughts. However, quickly we see that when he meets the ghost, a switch is flipped. You see that Hamlet starts to move from that spectrum, the far end of insanity, more towards a little bit of sanity. Now, at that point, he's still not on stable ground, but he's moved farther away from the cliff. And then finally, he begins to formulate a plan from meeting the ghost. And that's where we'll pick up a little bit, starting in Act 1.
So, in Act 1, we find Hamlet is in distraught after the falling of his father's death. In this act, at the beginning, he's very somber and dark and solemn. His mother and the king, Claudius, are trying to console him, even though he's still sad over his father's death. And so, in Scene 2, line 1 through 3, he says, "Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against, O God, God." So when he said this quote, he was by himself in a room, and to me, talking about melting flesh sounds kind of crazy. And so that is before he met the ghost. When he does meet the ghost greatly affects his mindset. From now being lost and not knowing where to go, the ghost gave him a path to go on to find out, who killed his father and what his goals are. So, in that scene, Scene 5, line 2:10, he says, "O cursed spite, that ever I was born to set it right. Nay, come, let's go together." And so that is the end when he's done talking with the ghost, and he starts to begin formulating a plan to take vengeance on his father's murderer.
So picking up in Act 2, we've seen, we kind of just left Hamlet thinking about where his plan is going to go. And initially, in Act 2 already, in Scene 2 right there, Polonius is saying that, he's mentioning that that Hamlet really isn't completely mad. Polonius still clearly believes that Hamlet is mad, yet right here he references there's a method to his madness almost. And that method, as we'll see as we further progress, is going to move more towards a further sanity and a complete clarity of mind. But right here, even Polonius, other characters, are noting that Hamlet isn't completely insane, and that's a key distinction that wasn't made in Act 1. And furthermore, Hamlet himself, at the end of Act 2, officially finalizes that plan. That he's going to have them have the actors perform the play, and that how Claudius reacts is going to be how he could catch right here the conscience of the king, and that clearly shows that he's a man with a plan right there, and is going to put it into action. So at this point, we really see that key distinction of where he moves from insanity to sanity, and then he'll further cement that sanity in the next 3 acts.
Now as we move on to Act 3, we get a little glimpse of Ophelia and Hamlet's relationship with her, which is a very important theme of the entire play. And we see in Act 3, when they're discussing their feelings for each other, Hamlet does say in line 25 that, "I did love you once," but Hamlet now understands that he does not love her anymore. And he really does not have time for Ophelia in his new life, which involves seeking vengeance and retaking over the kingdom. Claudius, who was hiding when they were having this conversation, also he starts to notice that Hamlet is really not insane when he is talking to Ophelia. And he even says nor what he spake, though it lacked form a little, was not like madness. So we can see that Claudius, the king who is criticizing Hamlet of a lot of things, also sees that he's really not mad when he's talking about his feelings for Ophelia.
So we pick up in Act 4 with Hamlet talking to his mother, the queen, about how she was distraught after the play. And so Hamlet, in his madness, or assumed madness, had slain Polonius in this scene before. And many thought afterwards that the mom thought he was crazy. And then when the mom told Claudius, he began thinking that he slayed Polonius because he was even crazier than what they already had thought. And so from that madness, the Claudius and the queen believe that Hamlet is not stable and that he should be sent away. While our stand is that Hamlet is not actually crazy, he's just pretending to be, so his plot against Claudius can be made even better. And so when he's sent off by Claudius to go to Britain, he begins to start formulating a plan to get back at Claudius for having him sent away. And so that's where he starts making a plan to actually not leave, but to come back. And that's where he'll start to strategize and go against Claudius to exact his revenge.
Act 5 is the final act in which we truly see that Hamlet is definitely no longer insane, he has regained full sanity, and he is fully in control of himself. In this act, he has a great confrontation with Laertes about the death of Polonius. And in this, he says to Laertes, in this quote here, that it wasn't Hamlet that killed Polonius, but it was Hamlet's madness. And Hamlet does this because Hamlet understands that people think he's crazy. So he uses that idea, that guise of madness, and he uses that people think that he's mad to kind of cover up the death of Polonius. If Hamlet were insane, then he would have no idea of being able to use the guise of madness to cover up the killing of Polonius. So it's clear here that he is definitely sane. And from this conversation, and in his sanity, he goes on to formulate the plan of killing Claudius and taking revenge in that way. And we can see that by the end of this act, he is fully in control of his actions.
So finally, let's bring it all together. You've heard a lot of different quotes and the understanding of the plot throughout the story. But ultimately, what you should take away from this is the fact that Hamlet, although he started off insane and distraught by the loss of his father and the marriage of his uncle and mother, it slowly moves periodically throughout the story towards a quite sane individual in complete control of his life. Although one can easily see, how it could be interpreted that he's insane, that only adds more to the argument that he is fully sane. He moves from that idea of literally being insane to simply keeping that idea around him that he is insane to further his case and further his efforts throughout the story. So at the very end of the story, we see Hamlet as a strong individual who is in complete control of his life.